Does that necessarily mean that there are spiritual, emotional, psychological illnesses, blocks due to that? And can physical illness become overcome through those things? It's both. There's really two answers to this, and I feel like they are equally important. So I'm going to give you both. And they come together. It's not an either or. It's a yes and yes. So we really, in my mind, have to take both answers together. Answer one is, on some level, every single thing happens in my brain. It is my brain that sends the message through a very complicated process to my cells to respond to whatever it is in a way of illness. So whether it's something as quote unquote physical, as responding to a bite from a malaria-laden mosquito, you got bit by one mosquito. The rest of the whole cascade of malaria in the body happens actually because of how the brain works. Unconsciously, of course, so that's on one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is things like cancer, heart disease, autoimmune issues, the stuff that we tend to think of as much more a product of the mind. And yet, as I said, even the malaria, even something as simple as a flu virus or the common cold, it all has an important mental, emotional component to it. There is an element of the brain in all of this. So does that mean that physical illness can be overcome? Yes, it can be. I have personally known people, so I'm not just talking about from books or things that you've heard, who have overcome incredible physical situations through mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological processes. Absolutely, it is possible. The way that your cells are going to respond begins in the brain. It's impacted, of course, by everything, including the food that you eat, the air that you drink, but a huge component, the thoughts that you have. Okay. We know from science side that that is true. That doesn't, however, mean that our minds caused it. There's a very big difference between being able to impact it and having caused it. And the real problem that I have with the new science that's showing us what an impact our mind has on our body is that we immediately jump to the, oh, well, you created this for yourself conclusion, which is just not true. Yes, of course, the body-mind together co-creates its entire existence. But most of that happens very unconsciously. And if you've got a physical ailment, that doesn't mean you created it. The first half of the answer is yes, our mind plays an enormous role. The place where it plays the biggest role is in stress. Stress is a very, very profound immune system suppressant. If you are stressed, you are more likely to get sick. That's just, we know that. We know how that works in the body. If you are not stressed, if you are very happy, you've got a more robust immune system. Again, we know how that works in the body. So that's the most basic, is minimize your stress. increase your happiness. Doesn't mean you're never going to get bit by a mosquito with malaria and end up with a fever. Doesn't mean that you're never going to break a limb, or it also doesn't mean that you're never going to get a serious illness. But what it means is that you are less likely to get them. If you get them, you are more likely to heal quicker. And you're certainly much, much, much less likely to get a whole bunch of other things. Of course, it's hard to know because we never know what illnesses we didn't get. But in science, the way they do it is they bring, 20 people into a room, infect them in some way with the same virus, the equivalent of, one guy sneezing in the room or coughing in the room. And they see, some get really sick. A bunch get kind of sick. Some don't get sick at all. So we know that this variation exists, and we know that there's a huge element played by our mental state. Stress suppresses our immune system. Our belief system also has a huge role to play. If you believe that you are sick, chances are you're going to make yourself sicker. Now, sadly, the converse doesn't work. If you don't believe you're sick, that doesn't mean you're not. A lot of us have relatives who may be doctor averse and who say, no, nothing's wrong, I'm fine. And you're like, for God's sakes, you've been, running this fever for 3 weeks. I'm not going to listen to it anymore. I'm getting you to a doctor. So not believing that you're sick doesn't mean you're not. But believing you're sick very frequently is going to exacerbate, if not create, things in your body. And not believing you're sick, even if you are, actually it also turns out is a very, very powerful inoculation. Tend to heal quicker. Because there's a sense in the body, if I'm well, and that's what the intelligence is telling the self. So that's the one half. The other half, though, is the body is matter. It's made up of the 5 elements. We know what the elements do. Here's water. If I take this water and pour it on the couch is going to get wet. It's matter. It's what happens. It's what water does. If I take the element of fire, if anyone has a matchbook or a lighter, and we take it and I light the couch on fire, it's going to burn. It's the science of matter. If I take the water and I pour it on myself, I'm going to get wet. It doesn't have to be just an inanimate object. It's me. Take water, pour it on me, I'm wet. I can repeat the I'm dry mantra all I want, but actually I will be wet. If I light myself on fire, I will burn. Even if I say to myself, or somebody else lights me on fire, I will burn. Even if I say to myself, I'm burning. I'm burning. It's matter meets matter, nature meets nature, element meets element. This is what happens. Get the right combination of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen together at the right temperatures or at the right pressure. This is what happens. Bonded together in the right way, here's what happens. It's wet, it's burning. And the body is physical. And sometimes it's something like the water or the fire. And you have to be really, really careful and gentle with yourself and with others over how much you try to convince yourself or others that this is all in your mind. But remember, it's important to hold the first part there also, which means my mind can play a role. So for example, pour the water on me. I'm still wet. but I'm not suffering. My mind can change whether the experience of being wet is one that makes me miserable, and therefore I end up tomorrow morning with a sore throat and a runny nose and a fever, because my whole stress response got involved. Oh my God, now I'm going to get sick. I can't believe it. And I've got this job interview tomorrow, and this always happens to me. And how dare that person pour water on me, and blah, 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 blah. So now I've taken the water and I've had a cascade of chemical and electrical responses that has actually led to me getting sick. Or I could have the experience of beauty. I could tell myself, yeah, I'm dry, I'm dry, I'm dry. Wouldn't be true in the beginning. Nature has to take its time. The clothes would actually have to dry. But eventually it would be true. And if I hadn't let myself get stuck in the wetness while it was there, then the minute the clothes were dry, I'd be able to live back in my state of dryness. It wouldn't have escalated or cascaded or gotten worse or created something new. And this is what's important. So yeah, we all get, bit by the wrong mosquito sometimes. You drink the wrong water sometimes. You get sneezed on by the wrong person sometimes. You have a gene express itself that you wish hadn't expressed itself, and it's now manifesting in a way that you'd like it not to be manifesting. Okay, that's now where we are. But now, how can I use my mind to ensure that this situation is as short-lived as possible, B, has the least amount of deep, permanent implications as possible, and C, that I'm able to use this as a way to expand, as a way to grow, as a way to accept the beautiful invitation that life is giving us to look it in the eye. And sometimes illnesses come on for that. Hey, remember, you're alive. Sometimes we forget we're alive until we fear that we're about to not be alive. Right? I mean, anybody ever taken vows of how they're going to change their life on an airplane in turbulence? Right? That moment of, oh my God, I might not make it, changes everything. We forget it, of course, once the plane lands and we're off, but in that moment. And so there's something very, very powerful about re-remembering the fragileness and the gift of our existence. And so that's the third important part to always hold.